Okay, remember our reason for sitting with you. Put it into the mind, make it very focused. The more you think something, the more likely that's imprinted and will become that. So we're going to listen to these teachings, think about the meaning, do some meditation, so we can develop our qualities one step closer to our own Buddhahood. So then we can do benefit for others, which is the job of a Buddha. Because when there's no ego left, and there's only perfect wisdom and perfect compassion, there's nothing else to do but to benefit sentient beings. That's it. That's the job. Okay. So looking again at this this structure of this course, this graded path, this course, the way all the Buddha's teachings are presented in this nice orderly way, you know? The more we have this understanding, the more the whole path makes sense. Otherwise, it's just this series of random practices that don't seem to have much relationship to each other. You know, but when we understand the structure, when we understand each one leading to the next, then there's some kind of sense of, you know, we've got this overview that makes sense. You know. Very general terms, really general terms, like I'm saying, the first scope, as they call it in Tibetan, junior school, I like to call it, this is about controlling your body and speech. The essence of it is this: controlling your body and speech. Why? Because doing things that harm others is what causes you suffering, because everything you think and do and say produces results in you. And why they cause you suffering is because we look into the motivation behind the actions we do, which are negative, which is they're motivated by delusions. So the first step is at least control your body and speech. Then, you know, if you do this, if you graduate there, you don't go further, if you just do that practice, that's the practice of morality. That brings good results. You can guarantee you'll have a decent result. Guarantee. It's a law. It's a natural law. So if you abide by the law, take it on board, think about it, analyze it. Abide by the law of the karma, you can live a happy life and die a happy death. Your mind is programmed for another decent human rebirth. But you can go further. You can go to high school. So now you can go into the root causes of suffering. You can not the first level. You control your body and speech by stopping causing more heavy-duty suffering, by not harming others. Here, you can get to the root of all suffering and quit those completely. Then you can achieve your own nirvana, your own cessation of suffering and its causes. What you're doing there is getting to the root cause of the problems, which is the neuroses in the mind, the delusions, the voices of ego. You get all the way to the root, which is this ignorance that clings to the self-existent me and self-existent everything else. When that's cut, you're out of samsara. You've got more work to do, but you no longer go back. But you can go further. You can go with the compassion, with the Mahayana path, and you can remove even the subtlest influence in your mind, like by developing this phenomenal state of mind called bodhicitta, based upon great compassion, which is based upon compassion, which comes with love. Step by step, we go through this. And this bodhicitta combined with the wisdom that understands emptiness, this is what gets people to achieve Buddhahood. And what you do then is you move to postgraduate and you then practice Tantra, which simply hastens your achievement of Buddhahood. That's all. It's part of the Mahayana. It simply hastens the different types of practices that hastens your achievement of Buddhahood. So let's go back to the beginning again. We talked about the very first step, junior school, grade 1 if you like, is the realization of impermanence. Already counteracting one of the major delusions in the mind, this misconception, this clinging to this sense of a permanent need. Intellectually, this is easy to see how it's a mistake. This is an easy mistake to see. But look how deeply entrenched it is, how hard it is to get rid of it. And yet it's an evident one. It's evident that at the growth level that I am impermanent. I will die. No one would argue. But even though we see it, as we discussed, intellectually, experientially, we have this deep instinctive belief that somehow I'm not. And our life, the way we live it, shows that, proves it. The assumption of permanence is very deep inside us. So counteracting this one by thinking about these different points that Atisha lays down. Atisha, this 11th century master from India who was invited by the Tibetans to come to Tibet. And then when he got there, he wrote this little text called Lamp That Guides You on Your Path, which is where he took the essential points of all of Buddha's teachings and put them in this nice, coherent, orderly structure, which Tsongkhapa in the 14th century labelled the Lam Rim, this gradual path, or a course, if you like. So the first step is to start to counteract the gross delusion of permanence. And Atisha gets us to think about three things. The first one is that death is definite. And like I said, to think about this isn't some kind of, death is definite. Yes, indeed, death is definite. It's the learning from it. It's when you see someone else die, when you hear about someone else die, you see the worm die, you don't just go, oh yeah, death is definite, look, it died. You bring it, you make it personal. That'll be me. And instantly a wake-up call, right there. Because right now, as we said before, because of this deep delusion of permanence, death's always out there, somewhere else, anywhere but me. Other people die. So we've got to make it a learning for our mind. And then the learning from this is, death is definite, I will die. Which counteracts this deep instinct. And the second point, even more directly between the eyeballs, is that I haven't got a clue when I'm going to die. Ballpark, yeah, 5 years, 20 years maybe, but not a precise thing. So this really should give us a wake-up call, which is, I have no idea when I will die, and if that's true, then it's logical, I could die today. Of course, we laugh when we say that. But actually, as Rinpoche said, it's best to think, I will die today. Best. But it's so shocking, because we can see, can't we, how much processing we have to do to get to that point. It's so shocking to think this. If we can even bear to think it. If we could even now just do the exercise of thinking that midnight I'll be dead. It's hard to even come to terms with it, isn't it? What we'll even do with it. So the first frantic thing is we have to try and finish unfinished business, isn't it? I mean, it's like it's a sort of a fantasy to have. We think, what a boring fantasy. Who'd want a fantasy like that, But it's a really excellent one to think it through. So, of course, if we're trying to apply the Buddhist approach here, the only thing to think through, if we're going to die by midnight, which is the end of today, which is 4 hours to go or something, 5 hours to go. Obviously, it's like, a good analogy for getting things done. You have to prioritize, okay? So a good thing, like if you've got a flight at midnight, suddenly you have a sense of urgency, don't you? You've got to get things done. And if you have 57 jobs you have to do, you've got to get a flight at midnight, obviously you narrow down, you reprioritize the jobs that must get done before midnight. You've got to get those done. But everything is focused on getting to the airport by midnight, isn't it? So suddenly you really narrow down your perspective and you really are on the alert. You don't have to space out. Well, I think I'll clean the windows now. Forget that. You get the thing, you do the things, you think about it, you do the things that are absolutely necessary, and especially the things that will help you get to the airport by midnight and be ready at midnight. It's obvious. For the flight. So you've got to pack your bags. Get the bus, pack your bags. Pack your bags. It reminds me actually of Steve Jobs. I love Steve Jobs. I read his biography. And then I remember reading somewhere his sister, they were adopted, and they met later in life. So she's a writer, and she said she was given permission by the family to publish this memoir. Memorial talk she gave. What do you call it? Memorial. Yeah, at the funeral. It was not talk. Huh? Whatever it was, yeah. So she published it. It was very moving. It was very incredible, actually. This man, as you know, he's really fanatic, crazy guy. I just so admire himself. I can imagine a really intense person. And it seemed to me, my observation, is whatever he did 1 trillion %. So when he discovered he was going to die of cancer, you could see by the way he talked, the talks he gave, the things he said, he'd really come to terms with impermanence, really come to terms with this sense of urgency about life. So as to what he valued in life, I'm not sure. I don't think he was a Buddhist. I knew he liked Buddha at some point, but whether he was a Buddhist, he seemed to indicate in his biography. But I remember that this is the thing, the sister, I can't remember the exact words, but she said she got this phone call that day, you better come quick, you better hurry, So she got there, and there he was, skinny as a rake, lying on the bed, dying, basically. And at some point, she said, and one of the interesting things she said, and it's not the exact words, but it was like this. She said, it blew my mind actually, she said he was packed, ready to go. Something like that. Now that's a really powerful point. Because we live in denial of death, because we think death is horrific and horrendous and horrible and how dare and shocking and oh my God, you're dying. It's like this nightmare. It's like the most hideous thing we can think of would happen in our world. So it's horrific for us. We don't come to terms with it. So this thought blew my mind actually, because all the time we talk about preparing for death, certainly in Buddhist terms. But in reality, what you're really doing in Buddhist terms, you're not preparing for, so if I use the analogy, I remember used to use this analogy for getting ready for, like going on a holiday. I remember this particular holiday I went on one time was to Puerto Rico, because I needed to do some editing. I had 6 weeks and someone offered me a little place in the sun, and I've been living in Northern California, up in the redwoods, which is all kind of wet and drippy and trees, it's like I can't stand it. I like all the light and the sun and the sea, So it was somebody offered me this nice house, and it was in winter, like 75 degrees. It was perfect for winter, this up by the beach. It's a little resort. And I had 9 weeks, I forget, 9 weeks. So it was the same thing. It was impermanent. I had 9 weeks. My death date was 9 weeks. And 9 weeks. So of course you prioritise what you're going to do if you've only got 9 weeks. So if I'd forgotten, I'd have to leave in 9 weeks. Then the day that I was, I'd forgotten, and I'd hang out and I'd get miserable, and I'd want to sue the guy next door for all the loud noise, and I got complained because the stove didn't work, and I got all attached to the cushions, and it's my house. Then I got depressed and thought, I can't be bothered getting up today. I'll get up tomorrow. I'll do it later. You forget completely that it's impermanent. You can be dead. You'll be dead in 9 weeks. And every day I look at the calendar, 1 day less, 1 day less. You have this sense of urgency, not to waste it. Of course, I'm just using a samsaric example, but this is the point, the analogy. Like your death date's in 9 weeks. So I'd have to prioritise. So that meant, because I was in this nice place, I'd use all the resources. So I'd go swimming and here and eating there and doing this and, making the most of it every day, not wanting to waste this precious opportunity. Of course, that's the point about your life. Don't waste it. And so, obviously, at the end of 9 weeks, if I'd forgotten that I had to leave, so I just borrowed this place, And Rita, the agent, I remember, she'd come to the door. Come on, Robina, it's time to go. Give me the key. Well, she'd have to pull me, drag me out the door, kicking and screaming, wouldn't she? What do you mean I've got to go? It's my place. How foolish. So because I knew I'd have to leave the flat, leave this apartment, that's preparing to leave. That's not enough. You've got to prepare for where you're going to go after. So actually, as a Buddhist, you are preparing for death. But that's just when you close the door and say bye-bye. You've got to be ready to go where you're going to go. So if I just walked out the door ready to go, but I'd forgotten to book my flight to Boston where I was going next, I would have been in trouble. So it's a really practical thing. Not just be ready to die, just be ready for the Buddhist view, be ready for the next rebirth. Be packed, ready to go. Have your journey worked out. It sounds hilarious to us to think of death like this because we think it in its nature, it's mystical. And no one knows. It's a big dark hole you fall into with fear and horror. But if you're really using the Buddhist view practically, it's not like that. It's not like that. This life is the fruit of the past one. Well, this one will be the cause of the next one. So pack yourself ready to go. So then the third step is not only is death definite, not only the time of death is uncertain, but hey, the third point is what do I need to do to be packed ready to go? Well, guess what? Practice morality. Pack your bags with morality. Stop harming others. Stop lying. Stop bad-mouthing. Stop killing. Stop stealing. Be nice to your husband. Forgive this. Don't grasp at all your things. Know you've got money in the bank, but it's a dream. You'll be gone soon. It's not your cushion. It's not your gas stove. It's not your money. You just got it on loan. You think like this. It's extremely practical. This is practice. Because when you do die, we all know you can't take it with you. You can't pack your money in your case. It's obvious. We're so caught up in the drama of it. When you really, in other words, when you really realize impermanence, quote unquote, they use this word, as we know, realize, when you get it when the penny drops, then everything in your life changes. Because suddenly, and this is a really good way to help you prepare for emptiness, actually. The more we grasp that everything is permanent, the more we absolutely are grasping at it. But if you start to realize it will literally end at some point, it'll be gone like a dream. And we know as we get older, and I mean older, not just getting, 21 and 22, you really know it's going like a dream. It goes so quick, doesn't it? Gone like a dream is a great way to say it. Then we can see logically it is absurd to grasp at it all and hold on to the resentments and the bitterness and the this and the that and the money and the bank and the something and the blah, the this and your reputation, your body, your this and your blah. It's absurd. It's like grasping onto that gas stove and those cushions in that apartment that I borrowed for a few weeks, forgetting I borrowed it. But it's mine. It's just plain foolish. It's practical. So you make the most of it. You enjoy it while you've got it. You enjoy this health. You enjoy your wealth. You enjoy your husband, your kids, your this, your that, your money in the bank. But hey, it's gone like a dream. So use it in the context of morality. Be generous with them. Be forgiving of your husband. Love the children and let them go. Accept that you might get sick. When we have impermanence, this is a starting point. This is junior school, but already profound. It sets the tone for the rest of our practice. And the point is, impermanence is a fact. It's not a belief. It's a fact. These aren't beliefs. These are facts. Impermanence is evident to any person with half a brain. Look how out of sync with it we are. So, of course, knowing that the relationship could end at any moment, because Tom could leave me, Tom could die, I could leave him, I could die, because things change. You still act as if every day. Hello, Tom, how are you going? Love you very much. You make the most of that day. You love Tom for that day. But you don't guarantee that in 5 years you won't meet Penny, Penelope Cruz, and fall in love with her. You can't guarantee that won't happen. So you do the best you can. But you don't live in fear and panic of it. You realize life is impermanent. You realize that, say, a relationship is like life. It's like a certain amount of karma, a certain amount of petrol you put in that tank. And then when it ends, it's over. This is why for the Buddhists, there's no big drama about divorce. There's no sacrament of marriage. God made you and gave you all this trip. Nothing like that. When karma's finished, karma's finished. Bye-bye. Over, Okay, Tom and me are over. So you don't become cynical and depressed. Well, he could leave you at any moment. Why bother? You enjoy it while you've got like the 9 weeks in the apartment. You use it. You enjoy it while you've got it. Knowing it will end at some point. You just don't know whether death or the end will come first. This is reasonable. It's practical. It's not depressing. It's only depressing because we've believed in the opposite for so long. So we've got to adjust to it, not be cynical about it. And then it just becomes implied in your life. You appreciate what you've got every day because you realise how precious it is, how fortunate I am. Hi, sweetheart, how are you? You're still delighting, we're still together and harmonious, That's how you prepare for death. I saw one of his Zen statements somewhere. How do you prepare for death? Live a good life. How do you live a good life? Prepare for death. Yeah, very nice, something like that. Very nice. Because when I realized I only had 9 weeks or whatever it was in that nice apartment, that everything I did each day was determined by that, wasn't it? So I've got a flight at midnight. Everything I do now has to be useful to my getting that flight at midnight. It's got to be going towards that. So I prioritize what's important, because that's the goal, flight at midnight. Well, death is the goal. So what will help me at that point? That's the third point. What is it that will help me at the time of death? What is it that will help me at the time before I get my flight? The bag packed, the ticket, the passport, the this, the that, the door locked, boom, out the door. It's practical. It's practical. So what will help me be ready at the time of death? Practicing morality, practicing goodness, giving up grasping, giving up clinging to things impermanent, doing my practice, sowing lots of really excellent, packing my bags full of excellent seeds, programming my mind. So when death arrives, literally, for a person who's lived a life like this, death is a blissful experience. They say anyway, as your mind gets more subtle, because your subtle mind is more blissful and less connected to neuroses, anyway you're going to get more blissful. Unless, of course, you're dying with fear and panic. Then it is a total nightmare. Because as your mind gets more subtle, you literally have visions of your future life. I remember one time when I had malaria and hepatitis in India, very sick. And one lama said I was close to death. I didn't know I was close to death. I just knew I felt terrible, But I remember, it was like, they say when your body, when you start to die, the earth element ceases and your body becomes like heavy as lead. My body felt like that, like I was sinking into the bed, That's exactly how they say it's a sign of death. And my mind was more subtle. I remember I was like hallucinating, I remember thinking of this friend of mine from England. And I knew what she was thinking. Your mind is going to the more subtle. So your mind is much more sensitive, which is why it's so important to have a conducive environment for a dying person. Everything around the person should only activate virtue in them. No attachment, no dramas, no garbage, no enemies there, even no very strong attachment objects. Everything in that room should be totally conducive to the person to die with a happy mind. It's like a really dangerous time. I'm not kidding. The smallest thing can be so disturbing to a person's mind when they die. If it's strong attachment that's activated, strong aversion, difficult things, it's so difficult a time. It's a dangerous time for a person, truly. So unless you're really practiced in virtue. And that's the most important thing. So that you die with a really happy, virtuous mind, all the imprints in the mind, all the training done, and you can relax. Death will be bliss. Yeah. Yeah. Huh? Yes. Yes. It's difficult. So these days people are much more susceptible, aren't they, in hospitals? People are much more kind now and allow people with more freedom. So the main thing is, and this is instructions from Rama's Open now, I'm reading this book of his, to make the place here very conducive, make it beautiful. Flowers and peace, it's got to be peaceful and beautiful. So a person is a Buddhist, you make sure there are really beautiful images everywhere. So because you're spacing out, you can't hold anything in your mind. So whatever you see has to leave those imprints in your mind. If there's going to be sounds, don't have rabbiting on and talking and gossiping and not, even if the person looks like in a coma, do not have this. Have peaceful. And any sounds, let's say for a Buddhist, it should be sort of the Buddhist sounds, like their prayers or stuff very quiet so they can hear it. So, because I know when you're very ill, like I was very sick, I couldn't hold my mind to concentrate and do my practices. So to have like on tapes, you practice them so you can hear those. It's easy for that imprint to be in the mind. Everything should be conducive for that person to be peaceful and harmonious and virtuous, not attachment things. Really, that's so important. So yeah, flowers, pleasant sounds, peaceful people around and leave them, don't hanker and touch them and rabbit on and talk about things. Because sometimes when you are in a coma, you can still be very conscious and hear what's going on. Everything. Oh my God, yes, utterly. Oh my God, utterly. Everything in that room should be for the sake of the person dying. Everything that goes on in that room should be for their sake, and that means to help them die with virtue. So then, if you're talking, because we're all anxious and neurotic. So especially when you're dying, you're anxious and neurotic. So praise the person, love them, praise them, tell them what a wonderful job they've done, remind them of good things about themselves, so they can be some optimism in their mind. Their mind can be calm and feel confident and happy if they've done a good job. Talk about compassion if they're Christian, talk about God, talk about love, all these things. And then if they're Buddhist, do prayers and practice, say mantras. Don't drug them too much if you can help it. Everything should be for the benefit of that person to help trigger virtue. Happy mind, virtuous, optimism, confidence, everything. That's it. That's the most precious. As Lama Zopa says, well, if you can help a person in their life, the best time is the time of death. That's his transition to the next life. And because we've all got so many karmic imprints on our mind, trillions, suddenly a person who really has practiced all their life, but strong situation arising at the time of the death that activates strong anger or attachment can completely activate the wrong karma to write. We can be confident about the process, but we have to do everything we can to make sure that it's peaceful for the person. So important. And this means when they look like they're zonked out, do not rab it on. Keep it quiet, especially as they're getting closer to death. The breath is getting longer. It's becoming more difficult. Have only really just quiet. Nothing, no talking at all, except for any prayers. So important. Yeah. When a strong delusion is the one that ripens before you stop breathing, which becomes what they call the throwing karma. That causes the main karma that will determine the rebirth. If it is a non-virtue, it doesn't mean if you have some attachment at the time of death that becomes the one that will throw you into the next life. The way you are at the death, unhappy, happy, whatever, will trigger the karma that will be the one that will cause the rebirth. If that is a negative one, then necessarily it will be a lower realm, spirit, hell being, or animal. Can't hear you, though. Yeah, so what I'm saying is that there are trillions of imprints in the mind, seeds. The way you are at the time of death will activate one of those seeds. It's not the time of death. That's not the thoughts you're having then aren't the karmas that will cause your rebirth. That they will activate the karma, whichever is most strong, most prevalent, and whichever is similar to how you are. So if you're full of fear and anxiety and worry and attachment or anger or whatever, that triggers a negative karmic seed. If you're virtuous and happy and peaceful, that triggers a virtuous karmic seed. So a virtuous karmic seed will cause a human rebirth, or even what they call rebirth in the Pure Land, which is a certain kind of subtle rebirth that's related to the Buddha, which is very marvelous subtle rebirth. You can get enlightened very quickly. And if the negative karmic seed ripens, which is the throwing karma that causes the rebirth, that will cause an animal birth, spirit rebirth, hell birth. So that's why it's so important to help the person be peaceful and virtuous. Yes. When did they die? When did they die? Oh, okay. So first of all, it is still possible. Okay, first of all, it's still possible. Even let's say a negative karma did ripen and the person had a very unhappy death, but the mind might leave even fairly immediately. This is getting to your answer, getting to your question. Then they go into, after we die, the mind, it goes through this process of deconstruction. I might talk about the death process actually. We've got time tonight. Do you want to hear that tonight? You're okay for me? 8 o'clock? 7, 8. Yeah, we can do that just quickly. I'll go through the death process briefly, okay? But when the consciousness gets to the very subtle level, and let's say when it does leave the body, which might not be immediate, but often if it's a negative karma ripening, it might be immediate. So then the mind kind of wakes up, if you like, in this sort of intermediate state. The best way to describe it experientially is like a dream state, more intense. So your mind is more subtle. You might even see the dead body on the bed, but you no longer relate to it. The karma of being you is finished. There's no longer a memory of Robina. Even people who have near-death experiences say that. They see that body, but there's no longer attachment to it as me. Not everybody. Anyway, you're in this intermediate state. And then basically, especially if a negative karmic seed already ripened before you stop breathing, which is when it does, already you're programmed for your next life. And because it'll be, let's say, an animal rebirth, it could be quite quick, but you'll see the new mummy and daddy doggies doing their trip, and you'll run like a magnet, finding it very delicious. But it's also true that if you do strong practices right there and have practices done, and depending on the karma of that person, they can shift direction. You can still help them with prayers and practices to not get that negative rebirth. That's still possible. But as for somebody who died years ago, always there's prayers and things for the Buddhists that you can do, no matter where they are now. Because it's a parent of yours, you've got a karmic connection with that mind. Wherever that mind is now, any practices that you do, especially ones that relate to use the Buddhas, they can always be helpful to the person. What's sweetheart? Yes. Prayers. Okay. After he stopped breathing, or during the process that he was dying. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I understand. Usually when we say the time of death, that means before you stop breathing, because they say that the karma that's going to ripen, that will determine the next life, will ripen when you're still relatively conscious and have got discrimination. That's before you stop breathing. Already the karmic seed that will ripen is then, and that's the one that will determine the next life. Which is how come you will see a person who's very blissful. Like, okay, just finish with Steve Jobs, the way he died was so funny. It's kind of classic. Because they say when you're dying with virtue, and as the mind gets more subtle, you literally have visions of the future. It's sort of all these experiences of life that people talk about. They say it is exactly like that. It's extremely blissful. As your mind gets more subtle, it's like people see visions and it look like they're in heaven, blissful. Well, even if it's a good new rebirth, a good human rebirth. So Steve Jobs, the sister said, he must have been sitting up at some point, and he must have been there. Let's say you, and in front of you, Steve Jobs, and I'm behind. There are his two daughters. So they're back to me, and I'm looking at you, and you're looking at the daughters. He's Steve Jobs, right? And he's looking with enormous love and kindness at his daughters, and then begging them to forgive him for having to leave them. Not like clinging desperate, oh please, I don't want to leave you, but really full of love already. And then she said he looked over their shoulder into the distance, and he goes, oh wow, oh wow, oh wow, and then he died. I think that's so Steve Jobs, I tell you. I love that. So she didn't make any comment. But using the Buddhist explanation, we can deduce that he's seeing very nice things. So this is the proof that he died the blissful way, which means happy rebirth. No? Would you start again? I missed. Heard or had? Okay. Yes. Yeah. Yeah. Yes, of course. What? But the second she dies, she's no longer that. She can be turned into a dog next life or a white person. But was it happy or blissful or fearful? What was it? Do it. Was it happy or blissful or clear or unhappy or what? Okay, well that's not a good sign. So what'd you do then? No, you. What'd you do for her? So when you said you were doing prayers before, what kind of prayers? Yeah. I see. Right. Oh, that's right. Sure. No, of course you can. That's important. Okay. Sure. Right. I see. Okay. Good. Okay. I see. Good. Okay. Good. Yeah. Sure. So then, anyway, the way she responded, that's if it was, can't tell. No, it was happy or sad or fearful. It sounds a bit like fear. Did a bit. I understand. I shouldn't worry about being a white person. That's because she's finished her Aboriginal life. She's gone to the next one. Maybe she'll be a white boy in America or well, then she didn't see it like that. Oh God, no. Do things to help them peacefully. That's what? If you do what? Oh yeah, there's no point in bringing it out. You just keep calm and say. I mean, the Buddhist view would say mantras and everything. You'd say things that would help their mind calm. Right? No, it's useless. It is something useful. What? That could be useful. Yeah. That's all right. But every word you write has to be benefit for people to help their mind. If it doesn't do this, it's just being rude, it's wanking. If it's not helping people's minds, if it doesn't help people get some deeper understanding or empathy or wisdom, it's a waste of time. That's the point. Well, that's my advice. By practicing, dear. By practicing. Okay, that's called putting things off. There's 3 kinds of laziness. The first kind is can't be bothered. The opposite is very interesting. In the 6 perfections in the Bodhisattva path, we'll go into it in more detail as we get there. The fourth one is the most important, and that is, it's called enthusiastic perseverance or effort, joyful effort, because that's what we need to be successful at anything. So what are the obstacles to our having that? Curiously, it's called laziness. But when you hear what I'm saying, it's a very powerful way to put it. The first kind of laziness is can't be bothered. And what is the thing you can't be bothered doing? It takes too much effort, because we have this terrible attachment to comfort, and this is the grossest level. That already is the deepest obstacle to our ever achieving anything. We've got to make effort. We know that to achieve something. If it's no effort, to learn anything takes effort, doesn't it? Because you're stretching your mind and your body to do things you're not used to doing. So it's got to be effort. But we just resist making effort. So we say, oh, can't be bothered. The second kind is really tricky, and that's this one. I'm too busy. I'll do it later. It's called procrastination. And that's it happens so often and so instantly, you don't notice all the thought process. You know you want to do it. You know you have to do it. But because it takes too much effort, because what else do you procrastinate? It's but the thing that takes too much effort. And then you lie to yourself, which is all we all do. It's okay. I'll do it later. I'm busy. And that it gives us kind of, oh, that's a relief. I'll do the dishes. That's easy. I can handle the dishes. And that's why if we have a sense of impermanence, if you've got this deadline, midnight, you're going to die, baby. You're going to prioritize. So if you've got a deadline like a publisher waiting for you, you will be absolutely focused and you will make everything else come second. So it's to make it a priority for yourself. And that just really does take a lot of discipline and not put it off. And it's a very deep problem for all of us. We spend our lives putting things off. But also, the trouble is, we do, and then we feel it a virtue. Oh, I'm busy. But it's not. It's because it's too scary to do it. It takes too much effort to do it. The third one is the worst of all. And this is, I can't do it. It's not possible. I can't do that. It's impossible. And this is what holds most of us back from achieving anything at all. And we really believe it's a virtue. But it's like the worst one. If you call it a laziness. And if you think about what's the thing you're really convinced you can't do, is the one that, and so of course you're going to put it off. And of course you're going to say you can't be bothered. So it all comes down to attachment as well. Because we have this terrible attachment to comfort. Mental and physical comfort. This is our deepest attachment to comfort. And stretching ourselves to do the push-ups, if you like, takes effort. We all have this great aspiration to have your body nice and fit. You think of it, and you imagine you'd love to have it. I'm talking about ordinary samsara here. And then the thought of going to the gym when you're sitting there comfy after the dinner, everything in you doesn't want to do it. And then you regret next day. And we live in this constant tension between all the things we want to do, but we haven't known how to get to the point of really going beyond the can't be bothered, too much effort, I can't do it. It's really quite profound, actually. This is why we don't achieve anything. So think about that. And the way the Lamas say, when you know the benefit of something, then you'll do it. So we know the benefit of eating, sleeping, and going to the toilet. Hey, I don't need to make effort to go to bed. I love my bed. It's the most divine, comfortable thing. Nothing will make me forget that I have to go to bed. You understand what I'm saying? Nothing will make me forget I had to eat a nice meal. Because you know the benefits. Because you've done it and you're familiar with it, you're used to it. But the other ones, you've got to stretch, you've got to practice. And as Lama Zopa puts it, if you don't create much merit. Creating merit, quote unquote, is this Tibetan Buddhist phrase for doing virtuous things, which is against doing non-virtuous things. And if the attachment is running the show, then going against the attachment takes great effort. And you don't really create much merit. You don't get much success in anything if you don't make effort. It's sort of obvious. Making effort is stretching yourself to do new things that you don't know how to do. That's how you grow. That's how you learn. We all know that. And we all admire people who've got persistence and determination and never give up. Because that's what gets you the result. So keep trucking. Keep it right. Let's do the death process before we go to sleep. We can pretend we're dying when we go to bed, okay? We can go through the process. We can replicate death. It's a very good meditation, actually. Well, okay. All right. So the way they describe death, and this is according to the tantric model of how we function. the wind energies, the elements, all this way of explaining the packaging of a person, you know. And so there's various it's described in 8 stages, and there's various things at each stage that, as they say, dissolve or cease to function. We can say deconstruct. So basically, you have this package of many bits and pieces, and the death process is this gradual deconstruction of this package, you know. So one way of describing our being is, in the terms of physical, is the 4 elements. So the first 4 of these 8 stages are the ceasing of each of the 4 elements, starting with the earth, then the water, then the air, the fire, and the air. At the same time, at the first stage, at the same time the earth element ceases, and one of the signs of that is your body feels very heavy. Like I said, you know, when I was really close to death in India, my body felt like it was sinking into the bed. That's exactly what they say is a sign of the earth element ceasing, which is the first of these 8 stages. Now, what's also interesting about this whole process is it's exactly the same process as going to sleep. The same thing occurs. The same thing. But we just don't remember. Because what happens is you're tired and you suddenly wake up 8 hours later, if you're lucky, isn't it? Normally, unless you wake up in the middle of the night. You don't go through the process with awareness, do we? Because we're not familiar with it. The great yogis can. So the first of the 8 stages, the earth element ceases. Your body gets heavy. At the same time, your eye consciousness, the senses, the 5 senses, one of them, the first one, is the eye consciousness ceases to function. So, you think of this. Let's say I'm talking to you, and I'm really tired, and I'm struggling to stay awake. My eyes are wide open, but for a moment, I don't see you, you know, because my eye consciousness is absorbing, is ceasing to function, because I'm exhausted, right? Struggling to pretend I'm listening to you, you know. You understand? We have that experience, don't we? The eye consciousness ceases. The body feels heavy. The next one is they talk about this group of 5, they call kind of wisdoms, 5 capacities of the mind. And this first one, I think they talk about that ceases to function, is this wisdom, what do they call it? That can hold much information, a lot of information all at once. So look, when I'm talking to you and I'm tired, I can't hold anything in my mind. I'm struggling to stay awake because everything's like, you know, how sleep is this inexorable going in, isn't it? All the elements are ceasing, the senses are ceasing. So this packaging, the bits of us are ceasing to function, you know. So this particular wisdom ceases. And then this they say there's this subtle inner kind of indicator, inner kind of sign, like a vision that arises. And this happens every time we go to sleep, every time we faint, but we never notice it. We're not aware, we're not noticing. So this is like, they say, of a mirage. So this first element is earth. And so as we know, a mirage is like the interplay of earth and water, isn't it? So you have this kind of a vision of a mirage. Then this seamlessly moves into the next stage, where the water element ceases, the liquids in your body dry up. The wisdom, the capacity to distinguish now, I think, between pleasure, pain, and indifference. Like I'm tired, I'm listening to you, I couldn't care less, you know. And also, I can't hear, my ear consciousness ceases. I missed that last 15 seconds of what you said. That's a really common experience, isn't it? I'm sitting there with my eyes open, awake, but I didn't hear what you said because my ear consciousness ceased to function. This is what happens at the time of death. Then the inner sign of this is there's this interplay. It's like sparks. They say it's like smoky, a thin smoke in a room. But I think steamy is a good way to put it because it's the interplay of water and the next one, which is fire element. This is my take on it. Who am I to say? It makes sense. Anyway, this can happen very quickly or quite slowly, this process. And the yogis know it. Like when Geshe Lama was dying, he was talking to Tenzin Zopa. He said, "Go now, go. The mirage is coming." He could see the sign coming, so he was ready to go to death. And then he stayed in meditation for a week, which is very common in the great yogis. They can do that, and I'll tell you that in a minute when we get there. What? I'll tell when we get there. I'll tell you about it. Okay, I'll tell you. It's okay, John. So, okay, the next stage is the fire element ceases, the heat in the body ceases, the eyes, ears. That must be smell. Yeah, it is. Yeah, it is. Smell consciousness ceases. And this with the capacity to distinguish between friends, enemies, and strangers. You haven't got a clue. Your worst enemy's on this side of bed and your lover's there. You've lost the plot, baby. You have no idea, you know. And then there's this inner sign of like sparks, which is the interplay of fire and water, of air and air. So you're gradually losing the plot, basically. And now the fourth stage of death is the air element ceases, you know, and during this period, we know when people die, the breath going out gets longer and longer, the breath going in gets shorter and shorter. That's why they have all this rattling. People talk about the death rattle. I haven't been around doing dying people, so I don't know. But yeah. And then the touch consciousness, tactile, and the taste cease. The tongue shrinks and turns blue at the root. And as Geshe Rabchan said, I love this, that tongue that spent its life gossiping is now useless. So then the air finally goes out and doesn't go in. And now by this point, of course, for the West in general, they put the little thing on EEG and they see no brain mass and brain movement, they say, you're dead. Well, you ain't dead yet. Not for the word. So the gross consciousness has now ceased. The senses, the sensory consciousness has ceased. The gross elements have ceased, and this gross level, this particular conceptuality of this wisdom, as they call it, this capacity to. The wisdom that finally goes now. The fourth step is this ability to even know who you are and the point of your life. You know how we have this big, vivid picture of who we think we are and our life, where we fit into it. That's gone. It's like you've got Alzheimer's, like right there, you know. You've lost the plot right there. But now your subtle consciousness. At this point, there's sort of a subtler, the next stage, the fifth stage, as Amazola says, a subtler level of gross consciousness, or the grosser level of subtle consciousness ceases, which is all these different, about 80 different conceptual states of mind, which conceptual states of mind are more subtle than the sensory, but these are like the grosser level of the subtle consciousness. This ceases at this point. And then they talk about how you have these inner visions. You're not conscious if you're not a yogi, you know. These happen every time you go to sleep, but who notices? And so this is where they talk about the physical, the way the body is made up. They talk about how we're made up at the subtle level of these 72,000 subtle channels, like a subtle nervous system. Through this nervous system is coursing all the wind energies, more subtle than the air we breathe, you know, but still wind energy. And along with these wind energies, inextricably linked are all the different states of mind. It's a curious way to talk, you know. So already, these different states of mind are ceasing. And the wind energies, there's these 72,000 channels, and then crucially, there's this central channel, as they call it, which starts towards the back of your head, about up here. There's a crown chakra. And it goes down just in front of the spine and ends up at the tip of the sex organ for the boys and the cervix for the girls. That's the tip of it. That's the end of the organ. The central channel goes all the way down. And then there are two side channels, they say, starting here, that go up and then go down either side of the central one. It's not as neat and clean as this, but this is how they say. And then at each point, there's a constriction of these channels. Here, 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 and several down below. These are called chakras. You know? And so they talk about how these states, all our conceptual states of mind, all the chatting rubbish nonsense, all go through, with these winds are going through all these channels. And when the mind absorbs, everything is, and death, gradually is all absorbing out of the main channels into the central channel. And what blocks our mind going into the subtler level in the central channel is all these blocks. So we can't get our minds to be more subtle. The great yogis, through their meditation techniques, through their subtle concentration, are able to unblock these constrictions so they can get their mind to go to the central channel and eventually all the way to the heart chakra, where we get to the very subtle consciousness. This occurs naturally at death. The great yogis can replicate this in their meditations, so they're ready for death when they get there. And so gradually, to the next stage, the fifth stage, is this inner vision of like, they say it's like a vast white sky. You know? And what's happening is there's these other components in this physical body of ours, according to this model, called kundalini, this liquid energy, the white and red. The gross aspect of these is the male and female sperm and egg, right, or blood. And so these, the way they talk about how a being is constructed and how they start in the womb is a very different way, of course, of how we talk. But it's, it starts at the heart chakra with this red and white drop. The consciousness is there, and then it grows out. The channels grow, the mind goes to these channels, and the person develops. So everything at death is going all back into the central channel. The white is this kundalini, which is predominantly at the heart of the crown. This is going down the central channel, which is the source of the bliss in the body. That goes to the heart chakra. Then there's this big white vision. Then the next stage, the sixth stage, the red kundalini at this heart, but here there's some of it at the navel chakra, below your navel, which is the basis of the heat in the body, comes up the central channel, and like this red vision. And then these two join at the heart chakra, at this subtle drop. There's very subtle consciousnesses residing. That's how they talk. All the consciousness now out of all the other channels is coming to here. And then they join, and there's like a deep faint, something like dark, black sky. And then when these two separate, these red and white drops, when they separate, that's the clear light consciousness. And then if you're going to, when you're ready to die, the red one will continue down and go out the sex organ to the male, or up and go out the nose to the female, and the other way around and then the white one will go out through the nostril to the male, or out through the sex organ to the female. That's one of the signs that the mind has left the body. But the mind can stay there at that point for up to 3 days. And of course, unless you're a yogi, you're unconscious. That's why not to disturb the body for at least 3 days. And one of the simplest ways to check whether the mind has left the body is you put your hand above the heart chakra, right here. And when the rest of the body is frozen cold, if you feel warmth there, the mind is still there. You don't touch the body. If it's cold there, that means the mind has left the body. It's a really easy way to check. So what happens for the yogis, like Geshe Lama Koncho, this amazing yogi living in the mountains all these years, and there he was beginning the death process, and he sees the mirage, which is the first one. He tells Tenzin Zopa, his tent, go away, he knows the mirage is coming. So he goes through complete control through this process. And he spent years in meditation. And these great yogis, when they meditate, they can go to the subtle level of mind, and if you were to see them, they'd be looking like they were dead. And they would stay in meditation for weeks at a time. They're capable of that. So anyway, he's used to this. He knows what to do. So he gets to the very subtle level of consciousness. And this is the goal for all the meditations, is to get to the very subtle level, because that level of consciousness is the most unencumbered, the purest, the most subtle, the most capable, is unpolluted by all the junk. But unless you've trained, when you get there, every time you go to sleep, you go to the very subtle consciousness. But we don't notice. It's like you go on a journey every day. You never see the beautiful trees because your eyes are always closed. You go through it every day, but you don't see it. So this is what meditation is. These tantric techniques is training to get to the very subtle level, which is highly sophisticated practice. The greatest yogis are capable of this. Only. So at the time of death, and the yogis can stay at the very subtle level and meditate on emptiness to get all the realizations, even become enlightened if they can. So Geshe Lama Koncho, he spent like a week in meditation. This is very common. Oh, dead, gone, finished. The body gone. Well before. At the fourth stage, the heart stops. At the fourth stage, the brain stops. But his mind stays in the body. The body can kind of shrink, but it never turns rotten because the energy, the subtle consciousness is still there. I remember a lot of these yogis die in meditation position. So one friend of Lama Geshe Jamba Wangdu, the great yogi in Dharamsala. Remember Lama Zopa was in London one time, he showed us photos. He died in meditation. He was a Vajrayogini practitioner. So there he is in meditation, dead, with his little cloak on. And they took pictures of him over the 10 days he was in meditation. By the 10th day, his little head popping up, like a little shriveled up little bird-like head, sitting up just above the cloak. Because everything shrinks and shrivels, but it doesn't rot. He was in meditation for like 10 days, and they often are meditation for longer. You know? Yeah. Oh, right. Yes. 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 Of course. Yes. There you go. That's right. Exactly. That's right. There, that's what he left. That's it. Yes. It's true, isn't it? I wonder what. Yeah. Do prayers. And they sat there the whole time doing prayers, didn't they? All the monks, day and night. Yeah, and so what for normal people, the mind can stay there, but we're unconscious, and the karma is already right before we stop breathing, and the mind could leave the body very quickly, or it could take up to 3 days. It could take up. Now the thing is, this is where part of the advice. I've been talking to Yeshi Kadre, our nun who runs Karuna Hospice in Queensland, and it's great theory to say last for 3 days, but she said, Robina, she runs this hospice movement, you know. She said 70% of people die in hospital. There's no way in the world they'll give you a bed for 3 days. No way. I mean, an hour at most. Lama Yeshi, when he passed away in California, they were very kind. They let them take Lama, on a stretcher, on a gurney, as they call it there, to take him to another private room, and they let him stay there all day. It's very, very kind. It's most unusual, But normally, so then one of the ways you've got to do, this is what the books are, the chapters, it's like an instruction book. Now you do this, and now you do that, and now you do this, and now you do that. The book I'm working on, the Lama's over it. And so most people will be dying either in a hospital or hospital. The ones who've got, unless you just drop dead right there, in which case nothing much you can do. You do quick prayers and that's it. But the ones who are dying slowly, who you are helping die, which is not the majority, or the ones that hospital people work with, then all you can do is, be conscious of the process. And if they do die, like you're in the bed, let's say it's 3 a.m, you don't call the nurses, believe me. You don't call the doctors. You just do not say a thing. You let them stay as long as possible, And if they die at home, you just don't call the doctor for 3 days. That's it. It's not illegal. But people could freak out, So you as much as you can. And if they are around, you really request, and this is part of what is called the living will or something, that you do not disturb. And so the people you're there. There's certain things you do. You would you'd give them a blessed pill before they stop breathing. You would give them you put certain things on their heart, on their crown chakra. You put mantras on their heart chakra. And then if you have to move the body, if they've got they're waiting for the bed, then the best thing to do, they say, is at the crown chakra, because where the consciousness leaves the body is really important. So if you disturb the body by pulling it around here, if it leaves through the lower orifices, this is often an indicator that it'll take a lower realm suffering, a lower realm rebirth. But the best way for it to have it is if it can leave through the crown chakra, the consciousness of the central channel and out. And so the best way to help that is to tap there very strongly, or to pull the hair there. I remember one time actually in Kathmandu, we were in the car with a friend and driving Lama's over Mache to the stupa, to Swayambhu stupa. And she ran over this family of ducks, didn't mean to, of course, running across the ring road in Kathmandu. So we stopped in the middle of the ring road. Can you imagine? With these trucks and bulls flying by. And then Rinpoche is doing this, what they call transference of consciousness practice, doing powa, this practice. One little baby duckling, the mummy and the most ducks got away, but one little baby duckling, there it was, dead as a doornail, this little heart out of the body, beating like this. I couldn't believe it. It's fine. This cute little heart, little broken little duckling. And there's Lama's over doing powa on the duckling, pulling his little crown chakra in the middle of the ring road in Kathmandu. It was amazing. Anyway, that's a really powerful thing to do, because that forces, that can energize the consciousness to leave from there, and then it'll take a pure realm rebirth. Yeah. Before they move the body, before they touch the body, you do various prayers in their ears, you put the mantras on their chest, you put things here, you do as much as you can, practices, even for 10 minutes. You leave the body, don't touch it. Then, before they have to take it, you then do the business here, to force the consciousness to leave through the crown chakra. Then you can eat the breakfast. Huh? Then you can feed it to the dogs. No, what I'm saying is you make sure the mind leaves the body by doing this. That's the point. That forces the consciousness to leave, if as much as possible. It will help it leave through the crown chakra, which then is a good sign, because then it can get a decent rebirth. Yes, you can. Yeah. Yes. Good. Yes. 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 Good. Excellent. Very helpful. No, that's exactly right. And that's what this book is. And it's really, I'm trying to make it like a really simple, like instruction book, you know. I mean, look at the clarity of cookbooks. But the trouble is with Dharma, it's all instructions, but it's sort of written as narrative. You can't tell one recipe from another. You've got to really stretch your brain. So I'm trying to do it with bullet points, and now you do this, and now you do that, and now this, and if you're in hospital, this is what you do. And if you're there, this is what you do, to make it really clear. Because so many Buddhists, and of course Lama Zopa will come up with 47 different practices that no one's ever heard of, So you've really got to kind of get the essence of it to make it simple for people. Yeah. Yeah, yeah. Yeah, yeah. Are they dead? They are dead, and you're confident they're dead. Do not touch them. Let them be. Yes, if you can. If you can. What? Sorry, what? What do they do to check up? Oh, God, yes. Right. So the trouble is, so when a person has a heart attack, is it possible they come alive again from heart attacks? I see. So you can't just say they're dead. What can you do? It is very disturbing for the person. What can you do? It's good that. Well, if you move him very gently, what to do? I've already had this thing bashing his little heart open, so who knows what happens. That's where you should. No, that's where. Listen, that's where you should check if the mind's still there. If it's still warm, it's a very evident thing. If it's warm there, okay, probably the body that just had a heart, it's probably still warm. So it's hard to tell. That's hard to tell. But at least then you should do still this way. That's no good. Doing the crown chakra, I'm saying. I'm talking about his crown chakra. I'm not brushing his hair. I understand. Well, that's not helpful. That's not useful to him at the time of death. Never mind. That's okay. We did it. Yeah. That's right. That's it. Good learning. So then, any questions? Any questions? So we haven't finished the death process yet. Go on then. Sorry. Amazing. Wow. Amazing. Wow. That's hard to say. Yeah. Oh, absolutely. It really does. Yeah. So what happens anyway now? Okay, when the mind, for yogis, they do what they're in control. They meditate as long as they need. When they're ready, they leave their mind, they leave the body, and they take exactly what birth they want. They're all organized. They know what to do. But for ordinary guys like us, what happens is, first, as I said, the karma that will determine your life pretty much ripens before you even stop breathing. Then you go through this process, and so you do what you can for the person, you pray, and you put markers, a whole bunch of things you can do, okay, to help it, to facilitate the moving from the body to the next life for the person. But what happens is, when your mind does leave the body, it's a very subtle consciousness, it kind of has a mini wake up into this intermediate state, they call it, which, as I said, is just like a dream state, but much more dramatic. And you can even, because when you are in a dream state, people have these experiences. You can see things and you can travel around, can't you? People leave their bodies in dreams. You can see the past, see the future. And Yeah, and you can be aware of what's going on. Like when people have near-death experiences, you're floating above the body. It could be like that. But you no longer kind of care because the karma is over with that body. There's no sense of wanting to go back or anything. So when you're in the intermediate state, it can be very intense, depending on what type of life you're going to get. But in general, it can last up to 7 weeks, they say. First is about 7 days, and then human time, human time. And eventually, let's say you've created the karma to get a human rebirth. At some point, the new mummy and daddy, and I don't know how it is now with all the petri dish business, it's quite complicated, because normally speaking, they say the conditions that are necessary for a consciousness to join the egg and sperm is the presence of a womb. So which would indicate, interestingly, if they put the egg and sperm together in a dish, the Buddhist view would seem to be then it's not that the mind doesn't go there until it's in a womb. But I want to know, this is an interesting point now, who knows about cloning? Does anyone know about cloning? Well, what about this latest thing I read in the paper about this from a skin cell they've grown an embryo. So what do they do? Did they say what they did? I mean, you need to know, because normally an embryo is a combined egg and sperm, isn't it? Just a few cells. So they call that an embryo, but an embryo has all the signs of all the systems, they say. What? No, they said a mix of skin cell. No, they said a skin cell. Well, they said they got the stem cell out of that as a result, is what I'm saying. Anyway, it's interesting. But the Buddhist approach would be the egg and sperm come together, and then what makes it stay together, pretty much always, is the entry of consciousness into it. So all the eggs and sperm that go down the toilet, they're not sentient beings. There's no, and even the egg and sperm, this is what I checked with one mama, they're doing that, they mix them and ovulate them. What do they talk about in the dish? What do they do? What do you say you do with the egg and sperm in the dish? What do you do? What's the word? Huh? Fertilize, yeah. But the consciousness won't go there until it's in the womb. That's what they say. So then you don't have to worry. They're not human beings. There's no being there. And this is what I've also heard from some lamas, that it can still be a few cells multiply before the consciousness can go, which is I find that quite. That's right, and that's where it can't get the lamas say that usually it needs the womb. It needs the womb in order for the consciousness to go there, for it to become a being. It's not a being until a mind is there. So what happens is you're in the intermediate state, and you've got this intense, one of the things at the time of death is this very extra strong, intense craving and grasping, which are two terms they use specifically in this context for really strong levels of attachment. And then and part of that is this craving attachment to the next life. So when you're in the intermediate state, because the karma's already determined what life you're going to take, but it's a pretty intense time. You got pushed from pillar to post. There's no sense of an I anymore, but there's a very frantic craving for another basis, for another I. So let's say you can't be born, to your new mummy and daddy, like in my case, whenever I was, in about May 1944, my mummy and daddy must have been in bed doing their trip. I was in bed. So at some point, having died for past life, I was in a bardo, and then I see this vivid, the karma ripens, like Romeo and Juliet. They're in this big party, and then suddenly they see each other. Karma ripens, like when you first fall in love, you can't believe you see this person for the first time. You got that feeling? That's karma ripening. So the same with your new mummy and daddy. You're in the bardo, freaking out, desperately, instinctively craving for another rebirth, and then your new mummy and daddy start doing their trip. And it's vivid, and you are propelled by this intense, listen to this, Ford would have loved it, intense craving to have sexual union, if you're going to be born a girl, with your daddy. And when you get there, a millisecond later, you have to climb on a plane to get there. Wherever I died, I was in Melbourne 1 millisecond, from Bardo to my new mummy and daddy and wherever they were. But then there's immense annoyance and frustration because you're just this little mind and nothing, and you can't do anything with your father. All you see is a sex organ. So that aversion, that thwarting of the attachment is what caused you to die from the Bardo and zap into the new egg and sperm. Boom. What a beginning. If you're going to be born a boy, you run towards your mummy. It's very interesting, isn't it? Because this is the desire realm, Buddha says. It's invented by attachment. It's a product of attachment. It is completely riddled with attachment. Birth is about attachment. It's very interesting. It's not like a gift from God, believe me. That's what they say. Bring a new lifestyle. Off you go. The visa began. When she popped out 7 months later, she was a bit early. Apparently. Hey? Couldn't wait, that's right. Came out bum first, apparently. Isn't that Greek's birth? I was one of them. Poor mother. Gosh, it must have been very painful. Yeah. Yeah, you'd have this. You'd know exactly. You wouldn't even have a bardo because you know where you want to go. So you can go space out to some pure land for a little moment until you're ready to zap into a new womb when you're ready. You pre-book everything. You're completely organised. Yep, you're completely organised. You know you are really packed, ready to go. You can decide exactly when to go, what to go, where to go. You know in advance. Many of these lamas, this method they have of finding their new rebirth, they even write little letters. You know, like Lama Yeshe, one of his teachers at Sarah Dare Monastery, who was one of his close. Hang on, where was it? Oh yeah, he told one of Lama Yeshe's friends, who was a monk with him, and then when they left, he said, "You take all my possessions, and I'll see you later." So he got, when the monk left finally to bed, all the drama he just wrote, he got married. Well, that's he gave birth to the reincarnation, so he had all his possessions, nice and neat and all organized. So they know exactly what they're doing. They book their. I have to make this joke. They book their womb in advance. Yeah. Who? Lama Yeshe didn't say that. Who did Lama Yeshe say that? I never heard that. What's your source here? Never mind, anyway, whatever. I don't remember hearing that. It's 8:45, people. Want to go to bed? I don't remember hearing that. Maybe it's true. Who knows? 8:45. You want to go to bed? Yes, we know. No, there's different interpretations of this. The Mahayana would say, okay, if you are practicing that level of practice, which is junior school and high school, the wisdom work, then when you in that life have realized, perfected your realization of emptiness, you finished at everything, then when you die, there are 2 interpretations of what happens. The Mahayana interpretation, the Theravada interpretation would say, this is a very different interpretation. They say all karma is negative. All karma is contaminated. And so when they die, they say, now you are gone. There is not a fraction of you left. The mind has ceased. It's finished. Goodbye. Nothing left. You're finished. But the Mahayana would say consciousness is endless. It's not possible. What that consciousness does, in fact, is go to a subtle state of incredible bliss. And it lasts there a long, long time. And then eventually Buddha comes along and taps it on the shoulder and says, okay, babe, come on the Mahayana path now and become a Buddha so you can help people. It's a very different interpretation. You hearing what I'm saying? Yeah, very different. What about them? Same. Buddha said this is for everybody. This is Buddha's view of what happens to sentient beings. So then, yeah, that's it. That's his view of what happens to sentient beings. Just like the Christian's view would be that what happens is this and that, heaven, hell, blah. It's just Buddha's, his observation of what happens to sentient beings. And this explanation is, yes, the way they describe it in terms of, anyway, whatever. Yeah. That's subtle consciousness. That's your subtle consciousness. Yeah. It's subtle consciousness. That's all. It's subtle consciousness. Very aware. I remember myself one time ever, during a retreat years ago, I remember vividly, I don't know what it was called, but I remember vividly for a while, I'd go to sleep, I'd have a nap after lunch, right? And for a period, a week or two, these absolutely crystal clear dreams, must be what they're called. But what was also interesting was I was completely conscious grossly, and I heard all the things chatting around, talking in the kitchen, and what they were saying and doing. So that's how people are often in coma. Looking like they're completely dead, but they're totally conscious as well, which is like they're in a state of lucid dreaming. It must be very frustrating. You want to come alive, like that Italian boy, 25 years, his money wouldn't pull the plug, and he woke up and said he'd been conscious all those 25 years. That's intense, isn't it? Learn. It's helpful. Many advanced techniques are about learning to use your dreams, learn to become familiar with subtle consciousness, because the great yogis in their meditation, like Lama Yeshe, for example, he had this bad heart. He died actually when he was 49 from this missing valve. But in reality, and then he'd have a sleep every lunchtime. But as Lama Zopa said, he was a great yogi. He didn't actually sleep. He went through the meditation process, like in death, and went to the subtle consciousness, and he was conscious at that level. But because it's super powerful and he's got realization, he's able to do many, many things there. They can leave their bodies, they can manifest in different bodies, they can be practiced, many things. He was never actually unconscious. That many great yogis can do that. So it's excellent practice to be, even to start with being conscious during your dreams. So you're doing your dreams. Good stuff. Well, people always interesting things, isn't it? 10 to 9. Time to go to bed. Huh? I need to sleep. 4 hours of driving up and down the freeway. What I had to go to was I double booked myself, and I really thought about it, and I realised I couldn't cancel this. And it was giving a talk at my old school, Sacré-Cœur in Glen Iris, to their AGM, to the old girls, the old alumni or whatever. And I'd said I would, and they were so excited to have me and everything. And they'd also put me in this book. What can I say? One of their old girls, and they put this in this book after their 125th anniversary. So there were 125 stories for the 125 years, and I was one of those. So they wanted to sort of celebrate. So I couldn't say no. It was only an hour's talk. I got there at 11:30, had a cup of tea, did a talk, and came back. I felt I had to do it. I was very happy I did. And they were asking questions. Yeah. Yeah. Okay. Well, I need to sleep. I'm not a great yogi. Lama Zopa, let me say, Roger, Lama Zopa's attendant, because Lama Zopa doesn't sleep, you see. Like some of these many yogis don't sleep. He meditates all night, has for years. And as Roger said one time, another Roger's business attendant, he said, for Rinpoche, sleep is a disgusting waste of time. So when I go sinking into my bed with complete pleasure, I try to remember before I go to sleep, may I find sleep a disgusting waste of time. At least I sow the seed, I'm not ready to not sleep yet, my God. Can you imagine going back home and then meditate all night? That's intense, isn't it? I mean, you'd have to be able to go to a subtle level. You couldn't bear it otherwise. Because we are so gross and we don't know how to access our subtle consciousness. We just go to total oblivion for several hours, don't we? We wouldn't know what else to do. That's right. So one of the really good things you could do, this is what we should do in our meditation when we do these different deity practices, a way of combining this type of imagining. You go into the very subtle mind. And so when you go to sleep, you can lie on the pillow, and then you can imagine going through this process. You can reflect, okay, the earth's element absorbs in the water, and the fire, and the air, and the white comes, the red, the black, and the clear light. You just sort of think it as you go into, you sink into the very subtle consciousness, or imagine dissolving into emptiness. You can do like that. You can try. And then you see your dreams and dreams. Know you're dreaming. And then you wake up, you bliss out, you realize that karma hasn't run out, you detect the tank's still got morality in it. And you think, okay, another day, take one first. Okay. Thanks for your homework tonight. There's all been directed us to sleep. Okay, how many days have we got left? We've only done 2 days, haven't we? Oh my God, doesn't feel like a long time. Feels like about a week, doesn't it? Only one more. Oh, okay. Who's going? I see. So we better squeeze in a bit more then, haven't we? Okay, we'll talk about who knows what. All right. So we dedicate. We think all these things we've done today, a little bit about Vajrasattva, we did some Vajrasattva. Oh, yeah. Some Vajrasattva. And we'll go more about that tomorrow, and emptiness tomorrow, and bodhicitta, the necessity for emptiness and bodhicitta in order to practice these practices. We'll do that. But all these things we've thought about today, meditated on, insights into, how amazing. All these marvelous, marvelous things we've started in our mind. Even if we don't remember most of them, they've gone in. So we think, great, I'm going to nourish these seeds with my effort, with my practice, with my virtue. So they do ripen in exactly the way we motivated, which is to become a Buddha. So then I will be qualified to then encounter this is my potential. And make a passion grow and grow in the heart today. Jamchod semcho grinpoche makie panam ke gyochi ke panyam pa me payam gong ne gong du gavasho.